Hello everyone, this is part 33 of What If Naruto Passed the Genin test, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Post an additional 20 men along the breach, said Sakura, waving her hand towards the tremendous hole gaping in Konoha's northern wall. If those sound bastards come back, I don't want them getting through. You there, get off your lazy ass and work. The kunoichi shouted at a man leaning against a boulder, snapping him to. The scene of the recent battle buzzed with activity. Already Sakura had ordered the non-combatants and the civilians to leave the shelters and begin a damage assessment throughout the village. It had been less than an hour since Sakura took up control of the situation after Jiraiya left to find Naruto, but already the steward had forcefully settled herself into her position, breaking out squads of laborers to the breaches in the wall to clear away rubble. The air was already filling with a cloud of debris stirred up by the workers. Survey teams had appeared and were setting up instruments and mapping out charts on hastily constructed workstations, writing down notes about the damage on pages of dust-covered parchment, all by Sakura's order. Yes, ma'am, replied Chuji, his heavy plate armor clanking as he and Sakura walked along the road running parallel to the collapsed wall. Have the teams of your guards searched through all the houses around the battlegrounds? Asked Sakura. Chuji nodded. Every last one of the houses in the north and west sectors has been searched and cleared, and my men are quickly making their way through the center and spreading down into the southern sector. There were only a few remnants of the cloud or sound armies. The village is clean. Good, Sakura said, her face relaxing only slightly. But keep your teams on constant watch. We can't afford any slip-ups. I want you to redouble the patrols. And if you can find him, arrange for your engineer friend to begin reconstruction on our fortifications as soon as possible. I want this wall back up within 2.5 months. Sakura's gait quickened. She began taking strides that were longer and longer as she barked out orders, passing a ninja here and commanding him to straighten up on his patrol, or spotting a cluster of guards and ordering them to move along with the duties. I'll have him get right on it, said Chuji, keeping pace with the smaller steward. But the wall took almost 4 months to repair the first time. I doubt we can mend all this damage in 7 or 8 weeks. Plus there's all the damage to the city that we didn't have to repair during the first sound invasion. It will take a lot of manpower, Sakura. Chuji looked around at the broken and battered buildings lining the street. Without missing a beat, Sakura slowed just enough for Chuji to walk directly beside her. Manpower isn't a problem, Chuji, said Sakura. We have thousands of people here who are perfectly capable of working. People have lives, countered the guard. Everything you want done is going to require a masses people to give up a lot of their time. And they're not going to want to work for free. Don't you think money will be an issue? Sakura stopped walking and closed her eyes. Pinching the bridge of her nose, she spoke calmly, though her posture was a bit rigid. Chuji, I think you're missing something very, very important here. Oh? Asked the lieutenant, noting just how much Sakura resembled Tsunade. Sakura turned to him and set her hands out at her sides, palms open. We're at war, said the steward. Chuji blinked once. Things are going to be a little different from now on, Sakura intoned. First of all, people are going to have to realize that, while they may have a life outside of taking care of the village, if they want to continue to live that life happily, or at all for that matter, they will be required to give up some of their free time to make sure the village survives. In war, people have to make SS for the higher good. What about payment? Asked Chuji. People aren't going to work for free. You've completely missed it, said Sakura. Money won't become an issue because we'll tell the people that they're being paid with security. I don't get it, muttered the guard. Chuji, I respect you and all that you do for Konoha, but you have to work with me here, said Sakura. I don't have time to explain this step by step. Summarize, said Chuji. Fine. The ninja protect the village. The village protects the people. The people provide resources for the ninja. It's a nice little triangle of economic and militaristic stability. The village is not going to pay the people to maintain it when the village is the one already protecting the people. The guard thought for a second. I see, said Chuji. It's like the village is paying the people to keep it running by having their ninja keep them safe. It would be like paying the people twice if it compensated them with money for maintaining it. Exactly, said Sakura. People aren't going to like it, you know. The public aren't going to like a lot of things, said the steward, but they're going to put up with some temporary inconveniences, if they want to continue living in a place like Konoha where they'll be able to maintain as much freedom as possible. Sakura resumed walking, Chuji on her heels, and strode up to one of the tables set around the site. All four men clustered around the wooden workstation looked up from the dusty charts, graphs, and maps that had been hastily drawn up. Busy gentlemen? Asked Sakura, putting her hands on the table and leaning on it a bit, her face fixing on them one by one. Not so much that we can't speak with you, ma'am, said one of the men, evidently the head of the group. Good, said the steward. Status report. They looked around at one another for a moment before the leader turned his head back to Sakura. Well, he stammered, we've not had time to properly assess the situation just yet, but we're one of the teams called in to survey and estimate how much material will be necessary to rebuild this particular section of the breach and how long it will take to gather all of the supplies. We're handling part of the logistics basically. And there are 7 teams like yours out here, right? Yes, ma'am. And what do you calculate your section will take to rebuild? The head of the group hesitated for just a second, unsure how to respond to the steely woman before him. Well, our conservative estimates are about 80 metric tons of TSLE reinforced concrete for the foundation, and nearly 400 metric tons of stone for the actual wall, given what we've seen here. But all those estimates are really quite preliminary. He sounded nervous. And? The steward probed, raising one eyebrow. And? The man continued hesitantly, a bead of sweat forming on his sun-battered forehead. We're estimating that it will take approximately 9 weeks, give or take a few days, to acquire the resources. A silence fell over everything. Sakura looked down at the maps and charts, not really going over the numbers or figures, but staring intently enough at them that everyone got the impression she was running them through her head. She looked up. You have 28 days, said Sakura without any feeling in her voice, not dropping her gaze from the man's eyes. Have all the materials assembled on site for construction to begin by then, and I'm holding your team personally responsible for any failure to do so. What? The head of the group stuttered. 28 days. There's no way we. And spread the word to the other teams, said the steward, interrupting him. I want every last scrap of rock we need to complete these projects inside this village within 28 days, or there will be hell to pay. She was calm. There was no malice in her words, only fact. But ma'am, said the man, his face paling, as the other workers around the table grumbled and droned amongst themselves, it would take an act of fate to gather all that. Then hope fate is on our side, said Sakura, looking around and then up at him, speaking quietly but forcefully. Because the Sound Alliance isn't. The men around the table just looked at her dumbly. The Sound Alliance attacked us twice, said the Kunoichi, her voice rising slowly as she stood up straight. They're more than capable of doing it again. Those sound bastards are relentless, they want to KO you, and the one thing standing between them and you is what you're going to help us build here. If you don't pick up the slack, it will end up costing you and everyone else in the village their lives. Think about that for a second. Everyone was silent. She hasn't changed a bit, thought Chuji. Still pushy, demanding, and cold. Understand? Asked the steward. You're not just doing this because it's your job. You're doing this for the sake of not only yourself but everyone else in this village. Yes, sir, said the man slowly in a low but firm tone, looking down from her eyes at the charts on the table. The shadow of his dark hair fell over his eyes as his hands clamped hard on the edge of the table. I'll make it happen. Thank you, said Sakura, her voice veiled with approval. Make it happen and spread the word to all of the other collection teams, 28 days at the very latest. The man looked up at her, iron in his eyes. 28 days is the very latest. My team will have it in half that if we can. His voice and face were both edged with anxiety and a silent dread, but also with resolve. We won't stop until our part is done. Sakura smiled just a little and nodded, then turned around and left the table. No sooner had she walked a few paces, than she heard the voices of the men start up again as they pored over the charts with fresh motive, seeking desperately to trim precious hours and minutes from the collection time. One of the men, under instruction from the head of the group, literally ran from the table towards another workstation, where he quickly relayed Sakura's orders. That went well, said Chuji, catching up to Sakura and walking beside her. The steward took a noticeably longer stride to pull ahead of the guard so he couldn't see as a large smile crossed her face. You just have to tell them how it is, and set signs, said Sakura, her voice reflecting the smile in no way at all. Once they know that they're in charge of defending themselves just as much as the ninja are, things fall quickly into well-working order. Well, Chuji muttered, my men have their orders and I'm getting bored. What do you need done? Help cart the rubble away, said Sakura without a second's hesitation. It'll keep you near here until your officers can report back to you for more orders. Good idea, said the guard. It'll give me something to do. Work hard and fast, said the kunoichi. I've got some business elsewhere to attend to. Where will you be if I find something to report? Asked Chuji. At the Hokage's office, she said calmly. Understood, said Chuji. Sakura walked quickly away, taking long steps and closing her strides in rapid succession. Her trek down the road towards the Hokage's complex, Konoha's nerve center, was racked by her stomach turning over on itself as she worried about Naruto. She hadn't at first feared for his safety, knowing he was more than capable of handling himself, until Jiraiya had suddenly appeared and planted all kinds of doubts in her mind. Why is he back at a time like this? She wondered. He mentioned that things hadn't gone wonderfully in Suna, but if that were the case, what was he doing back so soon? Things must have taken a turn here that we don't yet know about. Sakura arrived at the complex and bounded up the stairs, walking quickly by the rows of evenly spaced doors until she came to the Hokage's personal office, where all of the most important matters in Konoha, emergency meetings of the Junin, Anbu debriefings and the like, were held. I hope Jiraiya doesn't try to exert some kind of authority over Naruto or me, Sakura thought as she unlocked the door and stepped inside. As long as Tsunade is out, I'm the steward and he knows that. But will he try and use his prowess or experience as grounds to make decisions in my place? I hope for all our sakes that this isn't his intent. Sakura pulled open one of the file cabinets behind the Hokage's mahogany desk and began thumbing through the graduated papers inside. There were files on the Junin, past missions, low security intelligence. Sakura knew that all of the need-to-know information was elsewhere in the complex, but that's not what she was looking for. Here we are, she said, pulling out an especially thin file labeled, Steward. Inside there was only one sheet of paper, but it was covered in tiny, albeit, immaculately pristine handwriting, Kakashi's final instructions. This was the file where the Hokage could go to find sensitive messages left by the steward concerning matters of village security and upkeep. It was hidden in such a place since very few people, before now, even knew a position of steward existed, and fewer still knew about this file. Scanning the docent, Sakura quickly ensured that Kakashi had been perfectly clear when he named Sakura as his heir to the administration and defense of the village in the Hokage's stead. The copy nin had even gone so far as to point out that, aside from Tsunade herself, no one had more authority than Sakura. Good, said Sakura as she read on a little farther. So Jiraiya will have no choice but to allow for my command, and through that Naruto will still be untouchable. Wait. A small grin crossed Sakura's face as she read the closing paragraphs of the docent. Carefully, she slipped the paper back into the file and shut the drawer. So Kakashi-sensei saw his demise coming and decided to preempt our biggest hurdle. Sakura's gaze softened just a bit as she mentally thanked her sensei. And to think I was worrying about exactly how to ask Tsunade to give Naruto control of his own force. SC. It was dark in the corner. The cool, moist air stung the raw F of the wound Naruto so delicately cradled as he crouched there in the blackness. He tightened his grip over the gash in his side and pumped a little more chakra into it, sealing it partially. Okay, so he's too quick to catch off guard with a Rasengan, Naruto noted mentally. But I knew that already. The Rasengan is too slow for anything but a finishing blow anyway. Naruto sank a little lower to the ground, invisible in the darkness. He was being careful not to give away his position with the healing chakra. It seemed that Kaguya Kimimaro was especially sensitive to any disruption in the surrounding flow of energy, and Naruto meant to give his enemy no more advantage than he already had. I'm fighting him on his terms, thought the blonde. He has dozens of ninja at his disposal and knows the terrain intimately, whereas I'm alone and lost in this place. Naruto thought for a minute, crouching in the corner of the S-end hallway, trying to come up with some way to turn the situation to his favor. I've knocked out the power to most of the complex, so they're running around mostly blind, but with that regenerator's ability to sense chakra, I'm at just as much of a disadvantage as they are now. The wound healed, Naruto stood up and walked on silent feet towards the end of the hall where it met a larger passage in a T shape. He couldn't hear anything, but that didn't necessitate that he was alone. The enemy could just be using basic genjutsu to muffle or completely silence their footsteps, and in the pitch black they were invisible anyway. I don't smell anyone, Naruto reasoned, stepping out into the hall and turning right. Keeping his back close to the wall and his body low to the ground, he walked with the amber sword clenched tight in his hand. But that's all I've got working for me. No sooner had he thought there was no one in the area, than Naruto instantly smelled something, an acrid and burning odor that seemed to come out of nowhere. He darted into a nearby doorway and pressed his shoulder to the jamb to fit in as much of his shape as he could. Soon footsteps accompanied the smell, and Naruto distinguished 3 distinct rhythms moving his way. Garlic, Naruto thought as he recognized the smell. This has got to be a trap. No one is stupid enough to sneak around with that on their breath. The 3 sets of quiet footsteps moved by him without incident. From the sound of their tracks, Naruto guessed that they were wearing thickly padded boots. Likely they'd wrapped cloth around their feet to muffle the noise. Even if it is a trap, thought Naruto as he slipped out of the door and slunk up behind the group, I have to draw out the general. The blonde stood up a little and reached out with his empty left hand while with his right he poised the tip of the amber blade at what he guessed was the middle back of the person on the far left of the group. His fingers tensed as he moved in, ready to cover the victim's mouth. In a dark flash he moved. The sword jabbed forward and met almost no resistance as Naruto's palm jerked back in the gloom. There was a muffled slap as he grabbed the nin's tea, and thinking quickly, left his sword in their back and reached up with both hands to throttle the nin from behind before he could scream. Damn, missed. He cursed mentally as the victim fell back against him without a sound. At least it was quick and quiet. His fingers groped for the handle of his sword as Naruto laid the corpse back on the ground. He knew he had to move quickly if he wanted to get the other 2 before they noticed the lack of the third's footsteps, and after quickly removing his blade from the body he caught back up to the other 2, navigating the black hall by sound alone. Who's there? One of them, a man with a deep voice, asked suddenly. Naruto growled. He swung out and slashed at N level. The sword met some metal object, probably either a sheath or a sword, with a loud clang. The air whined as small missiles, moving nearly the speed of sound, rocketed through the darkness. Lacking time to get out of the way, Naruto let out a burst of fiery chakra, illuminating the hall and incinerating the bullets speeding towards his chest. The other 2 ninja though screamed out as they were torn open by the blaring projectiles. The burst of fiery light threw Naruto's shadow in all directions, plastering it against the walls and stunning his eyes. Through the light though, he saw Kimimaro charging at him faster than a striking snake. Naruto jerked his hand forward and pitched out a ball of white-hot and dazzlingly bright chakra straight at Kimimaro. The Kaguya dodged to the side, but the attack had its intended effect. After an hour in total darkness, the blinding light shattered Kimimaro's focus and sense of direction, causing him to stumble and ts. Naruto swung his sword for Kimimaro's N as he raced by, out of control, but the Kaguya recovered quickly, jetting a bone from his arm and blacking the would-be mortal blow. No sooner than the blades made contact, Naruto spun and slammed his knee into Kimimaro's chin. The Sound General's head snapped back, but he already knew exactly where Naruto was, and, even as Naruto kicked his feet out from beneath him, Kimimaro lashed out with his right hand. Petrified bones shot from Kimimaro's wrist and sped through Naruto's thigh, passing through it effortlessly and bursting out the side. Through a muttered curse, Naruto moved in even closer and drove the amber sword home, slicing the point through the general's ribs and skewering him horizontally through and through. Not to be outdone, Kimimaro exchanged one CSP ling blow for another, kicking up fiercely. A bone jutted out from his shin and whipped across Naruto's front, slashing a deep gorge cleanly from his right hip up to the blonde's left shoulder. The bones of Naruto's chest split without contest. Both ninja pulled their weapons from the other and leapt back. They could both see each other from the faint red glow that emanated from Naruto. The blonde whipped his sword towards the ground, splattering droplets of blood from it as he watched his opponent carefully. Kimimaro began to glow very, very dimly with gray chakra. You've killed most of my men throughout all of this, said the Kaguya. None of them are willing to face you in secret, much less openly. The Cloud Nin are also fearful of you. They should be, said Naruto, pumping more chakra into his wounds so Kimimaro could watch as they closed before his eyes. To them I'm nothing short of a goddamn Shinigami. It might help though if you didn't keep using them to lure me out. Kimimaro watched with guarded interest as Naruto's injuries, which would have been fatal to all but a few other people, sealed themselves in a matter of seconds. I can do that too, you know, said the Kaguya, pulling open his cloak so Naruto could see that where the puncture wounds, the ones from Naruto sliding his sword between both sides of Kimimaro's rib cage, were nothing more than dark patches of skin now. And I can heal these as easily as I can control my bones. Kabuto taught you that one, right? Asked Naruto. I need to buy a little time to lower his guard even the slightest bit. Kimimaro nodded. More accurately, he modified my genetic structure. He created a regenerator gene, tailored to my anatomy, using his own abilities and a retrovirus. I need to get him talking so I can think of a way to finish this, the Kaguya thought. He gave me the virus which spread the regenerator gene through my body, not only modifying my entire genetic structure but also endowing me with Kabuto's sensitivity to the nearby flows of chakra. And you regenerate by pushing chakra into your damaged regions? Probed Naruto. No, it's a genetic ability. My body does it almost subconsciously. Scary, said Naruto flatly as an idea struck him. But useful, I'd imagine. It serves its purposes, said Kimimaro. Much like my instinctive control over my skeletal structure is useful since it's merely a reaction in many cases. I assume your healing is a bit more active by nature. It's almost an unconscious thing, Naruto half lied. Really, I can turn it off for a while, but that's about it. He shrugged, keeping one eye on the Kaguya and noticing that his feet seemed oddly rooted to the floor. But at any rate, Naruto leapt back and Kimimaro whirled around as a thunderous ruckus shattered the near silence of the complex. A white spire had burst up from the ground at supersonic speeds on a course for Naruto's head, and a golden streak had burned through the air towards Kimimaro's end. There was a loud snap and a puff of ninja smoke as Kimimaro destroyed the shadow clone that had snuck up behind him, and Naruto kicked out, breaking the bone spike off at its middle. The Kaguya glared at Naruto. He reached up and pressed his hand to his T, stemming the trickle of red from the scratch across his jugular as the F mended itself. Naruto, using one finger, wiped away a small spot of blood from his jaw, the only evidence left by the Kaguya's attack. If I'd reacted any slower he would have taken my head off, Kimimaro fretted. If I'd been any slower that spike would have driven into my skull, Naruto worried. This has to end. They mentally roared in unison. Both ninja charged forward, the air whipping around them as they ran. Kimimaro disappeared in a blast of smoke just before he would have barreled into the blonde. Naruto whirled around, anticipating the move, saw his enemy materialize behind him, and flung out a volley of shuriken. Kimimaro's finger bullets intercepted each missile in midair, knocking all of them down in a clattering of bone and steel. Naruto charged in behind the failed volley, the edge of his sword glowing brilliantly and splitting the concrete like hot wax as he ran the slide point along the wall and hacked at the Kaguya. Kimimaro vanished in a blur of speed, reappearing beside Naruto in the large passage, his white skin shimmering like a bed of gemstones in the chaotic light that danced along Naruto's blade. The general reached out for Naruto's en, the bones, razor sharp, already erupting from his wrist. Naruto reeled around and caught Kimimaro's hand with his own and pulled the Kaguya off balance. The blonde ninja leapt into the air and spun, still hanging onto the Kaguya, and kicked fiercely for his enemy's skull. Kimimaro's free arm shot up to take the impact. He felt his unnaturally strengthened bones crack under the blow, but ignored the searing pain that rocketed up and down his nerves. He wrenched his hand free and swiped at Naruto, a torrent of miniature bones shooting out the tips of his fingers, point-blank range. Naruto felt the projectile's S into his chest. He ignored it. The amber sword screamed as it SD through the air and Kimimaro's F. Blood sprayed from both ninja, from Naruto's chest and Kimimaro's thighs. A half-dozen holes appeared in the blonde, each spurting crimson with every heartbeat, as a deep incision rent open Kimimaro's legs. With a loud crack, Naruto's fist connected squarely with Kimimaro's jaw. Simultaneously, Naruto's femur snapped under a massive pressure as Kimimaro's foot set into the blonde's upper leg. Kimimaro didn't waste a second. A long sword wrenched itself free of his arm, and the general plunged it at Naruto. The blade passed through the Junin's left shoulder, and continued on into the wall. Kimimaro pinned Naruto against the cold concrete and drew back for a death blow, spines lancing his wrists to escape. Noting vital, Naruto sneered, "Got you now." Red chakra swirled in his hand quickly, causing Kimimaro to hesitate. The general tried to pull away but found himself pinned. Naruto's sword slammed down through Kimimaro's foot and nailed him to the ground. Naruto swiped forward with the Rasengan, aiming for Kimimaro's face. The general bent backwards, avoiding the chakra ball by a hair's breadth, and jerked his foot free of the sword, tearing the appendage nearly in half. Kimimaro jumped back and flung out a massive volley of finger bullets. The Junin had pulled himself off the spike holding him to the wall and blitzed forward, bloody Rasengan still roaring in his hand. He took the bullets in the skull and disappeared in a blast of smoke. But the sound of the Rasengan didn't fade. Not again, thought Kimimaro, swiveling around. Naruto charged out of a blackened corner, a fiery vortex of energy in his palm, and lunged at Kimimaro. The sound general dodged, caught Naruto by the shoulder. Using his own momentum he flipped Naruto towards the wall, where the Rasengan exploded, scourging the air with thousands of tiny blades of wind. Scraps of concrete and dust were torn from the walls and floor and ceiling and whipped around in a storm of chakra-fueled wind that tore into everything, blasting the combatants in opposite directions. Everything went black as the red and gray auras of chakra faded in an instant. Both ninja disappeared, again, silently back into the dark of the complex. The smell of blood was everywhere. Jiraiya raced through the forest, his heavy sandals crushing the grass and fallen leaves beneath his feet. He hadn't found anyone along the way, but the air was thick with the aura of demonic chakra. Naruto had to be close, and judging by the concentration of the aura, but the lack of an apparent source, the Junin was underground. But for the chakra to feel this strong and be still underground, Naruto must have been using insane amounts of power. Jiraiya thought, "This doesn't feel right." The Sannin reached a small glade and peered through it. The sun was shining brightly, lighting up the clearing like a painting, but the atmosphere was dark and heated. Jiraiya felt as though he were in an oven. The stifling demonic chakra was so thick. "But where is he?" growled Jiraiya. Wandering quickly about, Jiraiya came to a large tree on the edge of the glade. He thought it odd that there were ribbons, green ones, tied up in the lower branches. Anyone less perceptive than Jiraiya would likely have missed them altogether. On a hunch the older man circled the tree once, examining it closely. His guess was right. Set in the side of the trunk was the rough outline of a door. "Now we're getting somewhere," thought the Sannin, reaching out and pressing on the door. It didn't budge. He pushed harder, the door didn't move and there was no handle on the outside, so Jiraiya guessed it was meant to open outwards. "Meaning that there's an entrance somewhere around here, but I lack the time to find it." Jiraiya lunged forward, blue chakra burning in his hand, and slammed his fist into the door. A seal appeared on the barky surface and flashed white, trying to absorb the energy. Jiraiya slammed the door again and forced more chakra into it. The seal flickered dimly, then faded and a seam appeared along the door's edge. "About time," said the Sannin, grabbing onto a minute protrusion in the bark and pulling the door open. An explosion shattered the calm, spinning through the glade and filling the whole clearing with a cloud of sooty smoke. Jiraiya leapt away from the door and into a nearby tree just above the dark cloud, unharmed and scanning the glade quickly. He saw nothing. The smoke was too thick. He was just preparing to send a wind jutsu in to clear out the cloud, but with a loud crack the branch he stood on shattered and splintered. Something had struck it with inhuman strength. Quickly, the Sannin leapt to a higher limb, but a blue wave of energy shot from the cloud and SD cleanly through the branch, toppling it to the ground as Jiraiya leapt away again. He reached up, and pressed his hands together in the seal of the ram and concentrated some chakra in his lungs. Another wave of blue chakra whirled out of the cloud and straight at Jiraiya. The Sannin ducked out of the way, avoiding the blade. He turned back to the glade and roared out the chakra-filled air from his lungs like a bellows. A loud gale rushed from Jiraiya's mouth and blew through the glade, clearing out the smoke and dispersing it thinly throughout the surrounding forest as a faint misty haze, giving the whole place an unearthly and alien feel. The glade was now empty. Jiraiya bit his thumb and threw together a quick series of seals. Slapping his hand on the bough at his feet, the Sannin summoned a trio of large, armor-clad toads in a quick puff of ninja smoke. Each one carried a sword across its back and a thick wooden shield on its arm. Spread out, said the Sannin. Hostiles are in the area. Bring them down. Sir, the toads acknowledged, jumping nimbly off into the trees, vanishing almost instantly into the canopy. Jiraiya waited for just a moment, hearing nothing but the sound of the toads leaping from branch to branch in search of the enemies. That should buy me a second, thought the Sannin, dropping down to the ground and breaking for the hidden door on the other side of the glade. Those elite toads should keep them busy long enough for me to get to the. 3 loud puffs sounded simultaneously from 3 different parts of the forest, while at the same time, a volley of shuriken thudded into the ground before the door. Jiraiya was fast approaching. The Sannin could see that the missiles were wrapped in a sparking paper. He cursed, leaping to the side and rolling away just as the shuriken caught fire and exploded not 10 feet away from him. A shockwave of dirt, mud, and bits of metal sped through the clearing and slammed into Jiraiya, knocking him to the ground but doing no serious damage. The Sannin picked himself up and jumped quickly away from the door as another wave of shuriken, these not wrapped in the explosive tags, thudded into the earth on which he'd stood not a second before. Where are you? Jiraiya growled, looking through the trees but seeing no one. I can't fight what I can't see. The Sannin pressed his hands together and a cloud of ninja smoke burst from his red robes, clearing quickly and revealing a total of 10 identical Jiraiyas that all charged forward towards the door. I've got to get inside where I might be able to know who I'm dealing with, thought the real Sannin. A flicker of purple and gold caught Jiraiya's attention, just before a blurred figure appeared in the midst of his group of clones as they ran. Before any of them could do anything, the figure spun and unleashed a searing wave of raw chakra, impacting the clones and spinning them to shreds in puffs of smoke. The real Jiraiya was not so inexperienced to be caught in the wide-ranged attack and disappeared in a blur, retreating to the edge of the glade opposite the secret door, and staring intently at the figure who blocked his way. Impossible, muttered the Sannin, straightening up but looking on dumbly. The short purple tank top and skirt were common enough dress, but the waist-length platinum blonde hair, the alabaster complexion, delicate facial structure, illustrious gaze and extraordinary turquoise eyes were unmistakable. Yamanaka Ino stood defiantly in Jiraiya's way. But, the Jiraiya stammered, half dumbstruck. How is this possible? Ino didn't respond. She merely stood and waited, staring at him with cold, beautiful eyes. Did Orochimaru do this to you? Asked the Sannin loudly. Is this all his fault? Still Ino didn't respond as Jiraiya glared back, racking his brain for answers. A whole minute passed in silence before the calm of the afternoon was broken again. I'm back, said Ino, a smile spreading across her face. The Sannin felt a chill race down his spine. Her voice had been icy and distant, like an echo in a cave. Several tones at once were laced through her words and her voice was darker than any Jiraiya had ever heard before, even Orochimaru's seemed warm by compare. Those 2 syllables were enough to make his hair stand on end. Ino took a single step forward and let her hands fall to her side. A dark energy began to swirl and flicker around her. It was green, orange, and turquoise all at once, flickering in the daylight, and making the grass sway in the slight breeze that wafted off of Ino in all directions. The glade filled with the scent of rain. Dread spread across Jiraiya's face as he looked into the girl's eyes and recognized the same glassy appearance he'd seen years ago. He remembered the Arctic voice from another time. Realization dawned on him like the day of a funeral. The demon, he muttered as much to himself as Ino as he looked on in disbelief. Orochimaru brought it back. That son of AB brought it back. Brought me back, said Ino, her words filled with a second voice, a malevolent undertone. I can't allow this, Jiraiya resolved, crouching down and narrowing his gaze. This is bad on so many levels. Not waiting a second, or broadcasting his moves at all, Jiraiya charged forward in a blur, the tips of his right-hand fingers glowing with blue light. I'll seal it away. Ino disappeared into the canopy as Jiraiya shot by beneath. She pointed her hands at him and formed a series of 4, lightning-fast seals. Jiraiya dodged agilely as a torrent of blue flame burst off of Ino's fingertips and slammed into the ground with the force of a meteorite, tearing up the grass and turf. The Sannin ducked away behind a tree as a volley of kunai thudded into the wooden trunk. Jiraiya spun around the trunk, his hands flying through the seals, and spewed a hyper-pressure jet of oil out his mouth. Snapping his fingers, he ignited the stream as it shot towards Ino. The kunoichi whirled out of the way and dodged the fiery geyser. She wove around the glade as the fire danced on her heels, never catching up but never falling behind. The Sannin tried to capture her in the searing blaze, but Ino was always one step ahead. Enough play, said the kunoichi, disappearing. I have business to attend to, she sneered as her form appeared behind Jiraiya. The Sannin glanced over his shoulder as Ino neared, her hands glowing blue with hot chakra. Jiraiya wrapped his arms around his waist and leaned forward. Ino stopped at once as the man's long white hair burst out in a bramble of sharp spikes, covering him in a dense armor of spines. Jiraiya slammed his palm down on the ground and immediately the grass spread in a wave around him, turning dark as tar. Ino leapt into a nearby tree as the black grass congealed and bubbled, becoming a murky mire that radiated out for no less than 50 meters around the tiny island on which Jiraiya stood. Ino jumped away as her tree buckled and began to sink quickly into the supernatural swamp. Jiraiya's hair returned to normal as he stood up and surveyed his surroundings. Almost the entire glade had sunk beneath the dark bog, and many of the trees around the clearing had sunken up to their higher branches. All of the smaller trees had been completely consumed in an instant. Even as he watched, the trees continued to sink as the swamp not only expanded, but also dredged deeper and deeper. He spotted Ino immediately and jumped after her. The blonde kunoichi grinned as he approached and dropped into a crouching stance, her hands out in front of and behind her. Blue chakra began to radiate out from her fingers and elbows as Jiraiya jumped through the dropping branches towards her. What is she doing? He wondered, pulling a scroll out of his robes. The Sannin in red opened the scroll, flinging it out in a broad sweeping motion. The seal-covered paper flailed out to a length of nearly 30 feet. Jiraiya's pre-SD thumb glided along the paper, smearing a thin trail of blood along its length as he whipped it past him. In a quick and controlled puff of ninja smoke, a dense wall of white needles, point up and very long, appeared all along the length of the scroll as it snapped through the air like a bullwhip. Ino didn't move. The scroll twined in on itself, facing all of the needles towards Ino. Still the kunoichi didn't move. What's she waiting for? Jiraiya wondered. He hadn't seen her use a substitution, and even if she had, he could still feel immense amounts of power flowing out of the kunoichi, demonic energy. He jolted a burst of chakra through the scroll. The edge of the steel-covered paper caught fire, and in a massive explosion, the flame raced along the scroll and flung all of the needles towards their target. Still the kunoichi didn't move or alter her strange stance. Until the first of the near-supersonic missiles came so close to Ino that she could have reached out and touched it, she didn't move. Then as soon as it came within arm's reach, the kunoichi exploded in a whirl of movement. The needles, as soon as they came within her fingers' striking distance, rang like bells and fell aside as Ino's hand shot up and slapped him away with a burst of blue chakra. The kunoichi was a blur, spinning like a top and striking out dozens of times per second at the needles, batting them easily out of the air. The metal spikes began to fall like rain, plopping down in the swamp beneath, even as Ino's tree continued to sink sluggishly into that same mire. Jiraiya's mouth dropped open and his eyes went wide as he watched from a safe spot high up in one of the larger trees. For no less than 4 whole seconds, enough time for Ino's tree to shorten an additional foot, the kunoichi was a continuous whirl of tornadic activity. Gyuken, he thought, amazed and stunned, but secretly admiring. But she doesn't have the Hyuga's Byakugan, does she? He watched for a second longer as she continued to deflect the tail end of the needle volley. No, she doesn't have the Byakugan, she doesn't need it to simply emulate the style. Even so, this is dangerous. Jumping out of the tree, Jiraiya let a burst of chakra from his feet propel him towards the kunoichi as the last of the needles dropped uselessly into the swamp below. This will test just how adept it is in the art of Gyuken. The Sannin reared back, his hand glowing with blue chakra. Like a serpent, Ino lashed out, leaping from the branch and passing beside Jiraiya before he could react. She slammed her index and middle finger into the center of his glowing palm, shooting a wintry bolt of chakra up his arm to his elbow, numbing his hand and leaving a red puncture wound. As she moved by, she whirled around and kicked the Sannin in the middle of his back, throwing him off balance as he landed and stumbled forward. Jiraiya reacted quickly, dropping down and pivoting on his weight-bearing leg, throwing his hands into the tiger seal as he did. A burst of white chakra shot from his wounded hand and fire exploded from his lips, enveloping a huge conical section of the sinking canopy of trees and incinerating it nearly instantly as Ino disappeared again. Damn, she's fast, thought Jiraiya. I could keep this up all day, but without a lucky hit she's just going to keep skirting my attacks. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.